Chapter 12. Raichand had always believed control was his strength. He'd prided himself on mastering every situation, bending circumstances and people to his will. Yet lately, all that unshakable dominance was being unraveled by a woman he never intended to care about, Aadhira. She had become a consuming obsession. Every thought was dominated by her defiant eyes, the curve of her lips, and the challenge that constantly simmered in her stance. Ever since she had walked away from him in that crimson sari, her defiance ringing in his ears. "You don't love me, Rudra. You're just possessive." He had been spiraling. Now he watched from the back row of the packed courtroom, hidden in the shadows, his heart pounding furiously with each word she spoke. Aadhira stood at the center, fiercely defending her client, her voice strong, her presence commanding. Rudra had not come here intending to be noticed. He only wanted reassurance, proof she was safe and still his, despite her insistence otherwise. He clenched his fists as another attorney stepped too close to her, offering a whispered comment that drew a small, reluctant smile from her lips. Rudra's eyes darkened, fury coursing through his veins. Possessiveness twisted painfully in his chest, and he forced himself to turn away before he did something irrational. Hours later, Rudra waited impatiently at home, pacing like a caged animal in their dining room. A table, lavishly set for two, awaited her return. Tonight, he would confront her, force her to acknowledge the magnetic pull between them. Tonight he would reclaim control. The door opened, and Aadhira paused at the threshold, her wary eyes meeting his instantly. The elegant simplicity of her attire, and the tired determination in her expression, made his chest tighten painfully. Yet he steeled himself, masking the turmoil beneath an icy calm. "Sit down," Rudra commanded, his tone brooking no argument. She narrowed her eyes defiantly. "I'm not hungry." "It wasn't a request," he responded coldly, taking a deliberate step forward. "We need to talk." "There's nothing left to say," she countered stubbornly, turning to leave. Before she could escape, Rudra closed the distance in an instant, gripping her arm and pulling her back into the room. Her eyes widened as he pinned her roughly against the edge of the dining table, plates and silverware rattling loudly from the sudden impact. His face was inches from hers, eyes blazing, breath uneven. "You don't get to walk away from me, Aadhira," he growled softly, his voice raw with both anger and undeniable longing. Aadhira's breath came in rapid bursts, her pulse racing as she glared defiantly up at him. "You can't keep doing this," she whispered fiercely. "You can't just drag me back every time I choose to walk away." He leaned closer, trapping her between his body and the solid table behind her. His voice was a dangerous whisper. "I can and I will. You're mine, whether you accept it or not." Aadhira's eyes flashed with fury, but beneath her defiance, he saw the spark of something else: desire, vulnerability, longing. His breath fanned over her cheek as he drew even closer, lips dangerously near her ear. "You don't get to walk away from me, Aadhira," he murmured, each word deliberate, possessive, and raw with barely contained passion. Her heart hammered in her chest. The heat radiating off his body was overwhelming, suffocating, and undeniably intoxicating. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to give in, to finally yield to the chemistry that had been building unbearably between them. She struggled weakly, but his grip only tightened. Her eyes fluttered closed for a brief, helpless moment, betraying her own hidden longing. His mouth hovered dangerously close, their breaths mingling. The air between them was charged with desperate, unspoken desire, fragile and potent enough to break them both. Rudra's thumb brushed softly across her cheek, a gesture so gentle it sent an involuntary shiver through her body. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked softly, the dangerous edge fading momentarily, replaced by something almost vulnerable. "No matter how much you fight, your body wants this. Your heart wants me." She swallowed hard, her breathing uneven, her mind spinning with confusion. But even as she stood paralyzed by longing, pride and self-respect surged forward. With every ounce of strength she possessed, Aadhira pushed him back, breaking his grip. "I won't do this, Rudra," she breathed shakily, stepping away from him. "I refuse to be yours only because you demand it." He stood still, breathing heavily, fists clenched in frustration and barely contained need. His eyes held hers, the mask of control slipping just enough to reveal genuine vulnerability beneath. Why? He asked, voice low and rough. The question hung heavily between them. Why can't you admit what we both already know is true? Her eyes softened with sorrow, and a deep sadness flickered within them. Because love doesn't work that way, Rudra. It's not about possession or control. It's about trust. And you don't trust me. He remained silent, unable to deny her accusation. Her words sliced through him, exposing the painful reality beneath his possessiveness. He watched her walk away once again, each step tearing at something deep within him. Standing alone in the silent dining room, Rudra knew she was right. His obsession, his jealousy, had been a shield to protect himself from something he feared even more deeply than losing control. Losing her. As Aadhira's footsteps faded, Rudra exhaled sharply, realizing that his desperation to control her had only pushed her further away. But this time, beneath the pain and frustration, another feeling stirred. A new determination, a willingness to acknowledge his own vulnerability. Tonight marked a breaking point, not just in their tumultuous relationship, but within Rudra himself. He would have to decide what mattered most: his pride, or the woman who had, against all odds, become the very center of his world.